Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin Dolan. I am the writer and author of Little Fag, a journey of self-acceptance and healing. It's my memoir. I'll begin reading section 1, I'll call from life to wake up, and we'll start at chapter 1. Normal is a fluid sort of thing, page 15. These statements form the foundation of what I thought about myself as I charted this course towards the energy of healing. There's something wrong with me. I'm undeserving. Life is hard. The world isn't safe. I'm not enough. Nobody loves me. What I braved. Enduring the pain of others, especially my family, was what I thought would be my life legacy. It formed the foundation of the 6 statements above. Not only was I to repeat what came before me, both in action and thought, but also I was to not question the wackiness of the upbringing I experienced. I lived with the challenges of having an alcoholic parent. Psychology labels this experience as being an adult child of an alcoholic, or an ACOA. The late Janet G. Wootitz, PhD, in her 1983 landmark book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, outlined 13 characteristics that ACOAs experience. Guessing at what normal behavior is the first. Almost from the get-go, I didn't stand a chance. Tell no one the truth of what transpired behind the doors of my Calgary home. Do not use my voice to speak my truth. I was taught to deny my feelings of sadness, fear, and anger to survive. I learned survival is what the Dolans were masters at. Sadly, of the 11 Dolans I grew up with, 9 siblings along with mom and dad, pain and suffering were the primary legacies. But of course, their life together didn't start out that way. Dad was born in 1917 in Scotland, Mom in 1921 in Calgary. It was 1938 when my mom, while watching a lacrosse game in Calgary, caught the eye of my dad as he played. Mom shared with me that a friend of hers introduced her to him after the game. She mused, "He took my breath away. He was so handsome." It's hard to imagine my 21-year-old dad and my 17-year-old mom beginning their relationship journey. Yet, it was those moments that set into motion the arrival of myself and all my siblings, including my parents' first child, a girl who survived only 5 days. Mom was beautiful. She was an accomplished artist, both as a singer and a dancer, at a very early age. By the time she was 16, she ran a dance studio in rural Alberta. Her grace was palpable, with her movement and her charm captivating. There wasn't anyone who could escape the charm of Dorothy Mae Dolan. She stood 5'4" and had an athletic build from her formative years as a professional dancer. I believe the true athletic prowess many of her children displayed came directly from her. Throughout her lifetime, she was never overweight, although as she grew older, she laughed about getting littler. I always felt proud that she looked so good. She was very capable and proud of how she did the best she could to support her kids. She always had a warm "hello, dear" for all my friends. At the same time, her energy as Mama Bear was fierce. Mom was a powerful woman. The neighborhood knew not to mess with her kids because it meant you'd be messing with Dorothy. I remember her powerful hands. She'd not wince as she plunged them into hot water while doing dishes or washing clothes. I recall steam rising from the water, but that didn't deter Mom from the task at hand. There was strength in Mom's silence, yet I always sensed her pain as well, and a dark energy surrounding her. It felt mostly like anger and sadness. When I stumbled into a rare quiet moment, I'd get a blast of both anger and sadness as she screamed at me for intruding. In situations like that, I'd have made up a story that she didn't love me. Dad was dashing, pure Hollywood leading man material. A strapping lad, blue-eyed with tall, lean, athletic build, he moved with determination. His 6'2" stature, blue eyes, and commanding presence were strengths I always admired. My father was also a proud man and brilliant. He was well-read, intellectual, and loved to consume every page of the daily newspaper. He was a writer with a primary focus as a sports columnist for one of Calgary's newspapers. His voice was beautiful, his diction slow and exact. I loved listening to him talk to other people. He had a tremendous skill for acknowledging people, always making folks feel welcome. His quiet demeanor, charm, and politeness were attractive qualities for me as a little gay boy. However, The quiet demeanor I loved would change dramatically when he drank. He was in pain, both physical and psychological. He had endured numerous heart attacks in his 40s, and his relationship with my mom was pain beyond measure I'd never ever really understand. I'd come to understand the pain the alcohol was covering up for him in his addiction. He'd share many stories of how his marriage with Mom unraveled over time and how the two of them caused its demise. Looking back now, I recognize some of the signs. As a 4-year-old, I remember a gathering with all my siblings, save the youngest, who was yet to be born, for a family portrait. Mom and Dad did not sit with their children for the photograph. It was rare to ever see them together. I breathed a lot of life into this quote from H. Jackson Brown, Jr. during my formative years. Be brave. Even if you're not, pretend to be. No one can tell the difference. It still works for me today. What I braved was never knowing what normal was. The unlearning. Of the beliefs learned from my family growing up, few belonged to me and none substantially enhanced my life. Pain, suffering, and pretending to be brave didn't bring me joy or add to the luster of what I would become. The lessons learned from my family members were primarily negative projections of themselves. It was their impulses, behaviors, and thoughts about themselves that became my beliefs. My parents had certain negative qualities that characterized behaviors and impulses. Because they didn't like these qualities and didn't want to face them, they projected them onto their children. I was in junior high school when I first discovered this. It was a difficult concept to grasp because of what it involved, but what I learned was that it all happened at a subconscious level. My dad blamed my mom for his drinking. People criticized Mom instead of holding my dad responsible for his alcoholism. It's classic, with projection, to blame the victim. The story became about how my mom caused my dad to drink. I accepted my parents, as most children do, as my primary teachers. Sigmund Freud, the propagator of this theory, suggested that without projection at play, my parents would have had to face their negative impulses in their full intensity, and that would have severely affected their mental health. So they didn't. Even though the mechanics of projection are undertaken at a subconscious level, their effects show up in our behavior. For most of my life, I breathed life into values and ways of being that had nothing to do with me. The unlearning would work its way through years of understanding the dynamic of projection. Essentially, I garnered a metaphorical PhD in knowing what shit was mine and what shit was somebody else's. It's a great skill to possess as a functioning adult, whatever that means. Let me chat a little bit about Chapter 1, Mom and Dad. In other things that I've written, I have kind of coined the phrase that they spent 33 years in marriage. And a lot of people would assume that would be love. And I'm sure at some point in time they might have been in love. But that 33 years, from probably most of my siblings' vantage point, although I've never asked them this, I don't think they would characterize it as love. I wouldn't. I think Mom and Dad were at war for 33 years. And it culminated in a big explosion, which I'll read about in other chapters. But for the most part, these were two people that were grounded in some pain that I think they could never uncover. My father's alcoholism was covering up pain that he had experienced through his relationship with Mom. And I would think other bits of pain that he had that I don't know what they were. And mostly what I learned with these two people was actually how to be with them, right? It took me a long time to understand how I could best be with my parents. Certainly not together, because that never really happened, but individually. It took me a long time to learn how it was I could take care of myself while in the presence of them. And ultimately it would mean, in order to better understand how to be with my mom, I'd need to spend 3 years away from my family to be able to come back and be able to set boundaries and take better care of myself. For my father, whom I'm the only child who had a relationship with him, it took me understanding the dynamic of alcoholism to have a relationship with him. And it was this: what do alcoholics do? They drink. I was the child that wanted the alcoholic not to drink. So I struggled with my father. My father never struggled with his alcoholism, meaning that he never said to me, I'm an alcoholic and I want to quit. He never did. Whether he had those thoughts, I'll never know. But ultimately, what I came to realize was that the pain I had in a relationship with Dad because I struggled with him drinking would never go away. And as long as I wanted the alcoholic not to do what alcoholics do, I would be the one that had the problem. And when I finally let go of wanting the alcoholic to stop drinking, when the alcoholic wanted to drink, I was able to have a relationship with my father. And I'm so proud that I was able to do that. And it's really the foundation of how I've learned how much I am like my dad, how I've learned how much I am like my mother, but ultimately it took some grace to understand how to be with them in order to, right, pull some things both out of the wackiness and pull some things away from the wackiness so that I could continue to have the life that at that time I was building and ultimately that I get to fully participate in today. So I wanted to share that background with you about Mom and Dad.